September 22nd, 2011 would become a monumental day in the gaming industry. That would be the original release date of Dark Souls. Now, I'm going to go ahead and assume that everyone watching this video does not need an introduction to what Dark Souls is. But for the very few of you who still might need an introduction, I'll go ahead and give that here anyway. Dark Souls 1 is an action role-playing game that released in 2011 to critical acclaim. GameSpot gave it a 9.5, Metacritic gave it an 89, IGN gave it a 9 out of 10, though who really cares what IGN's opinion is, at least in this case it was correct. Reviews would go as far to say as a very hardcore dark fantasy role-playing game that is role-playing right down to the roots. Another reviewer would go on to say that the sheer happiness you get after the trial and error pays off and you overcome the challenge is absolutely impossible to replicate. And honestly, I couldn't agree more with that review. Dark Souls 1 was certainly a game with mastercraft level design. Back then, the game was pretty laggy. Most people played it on console, especially because it first released on console and then on PC later in 2012. So a lot of people had a really terrible experience when it came to FPS, and you might hear a lot of complaints from old players talking about how terrible Blighttown is. And when in truth, Blighttown really isn't that bad of an area. It's not very fun, but, you know, it's not downright awful either. It's an open area where you run through the swamp, and in the swamp it happens to be poison water, and that applies poison to you if you stay in it too long. Essentially, make your moves carefully. A lot of Dark Souls level design is built around make your moves carefully, but Blighttown was based around that movement-wise as well. You really have to pay attention to what you're doing. Like the review said earlier, a lot of Dark Souls 1 really is, and just Dark Souls in general, is trial and error. The most famous among just about every area in Dark Souls is Firelink Shrine. In Dark Souls 1 and 2, it was more of like a connection to each and every single area. You'd go into different pathways and that would lead you to a new location. Or in Dark Souls 3, a lot of the game kind of traverses forward in a way. So like, you don't really run from Firelink Shrine to another area, but in Dark Souls 1 and 2, it's your main hub area. All your NPCs are going to be there. The blacksmith's going to be there, the shop's going to be there, the sorcerers or whatever are going to be there. Obviously, there's going to be a few world-unique NPCs that you'll find in different towns, but the main guys that you'll be speaking to throughout the game to level your equipment and buy stuff, that's going to be at Firelink Shrine. Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls 1 is like a big shrine destroyed on a mountainside. You really think of a shrine when you see Firelink Shrine in the first game. It's what's left of a shrine, of course, but you know, you got your bonfire, you have your shrine maiden who can't speak in this game, and unless you do a specific side quest, and you have all your other people that you'll find throughout the game that'll travel over to Firelink Shrine when you rescue them. There's nothing specifically special about this area. It just looks really cool, and you're going to be traversing back to it throughout the entire game to go to different areas. The last area that I'm going to mention in Dark Souls 1 is Anor Londo. Anor Londo is a vast castle filled with many ministers and knights and people with big weapons, big giant dudes and gargoyles with all kinds of cool shit, basically. And it's also the first time you truly realize your actual goal in this game, which is find and kill the 4 bosses with the Lord Souls, take the Lord Souls to satiate the Lord Vessel, and then fight the Lord of Cinder. So what I really like about Anor Londo is how gothic its architecture is. The very first thing you'll notice the moment that you're taken to Anor Londo is this big giant castle in the background that I mentioned a few moments ago. There's this church off to the left side, there's a city all the way down there. There's these cool giant paintings all over the place, dudes in armor, and most importantly, the Sun Princess. Overall, I don't actually want to spoil that much of Anor Londo because I think it's one of the best areas in the game. And with that, we're probably going to move on to bosses now. If there's any reason that a lot of people come back to keep playing these games, it's the bosses. Those goddamn difficult bosses. Anyone who's a Dark Souls player knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you've ever played Dark Souls for the first time, holy shit, these guys can be rough. Now for me personally, my first Dark Souls experience was Dark Souls 3, so the bosses in this game weren't as difficult for me, but if you decide to play Dark Souls 1 as your first Dark Souls game, you'll probably still face a lot of the same challenges as you would in Dark Souls 3, except the bosses are a bit easier. So it wouldn't be a Dark Souls video if I wasn't talking about a beginner's trap. That being the Asylum Demon, of course, because it's pretty much the first enemy you encounter aside from the very first two skeletons at the first bonfire. This guy gives you the idea that you're supposed to go head on head with him the moment that you see him. But truthfully, what you're really supposed to do is run around him, go grab the Estus flask, and then hit him up top with a thrust. But no new player would really know that. It's an introduction to the game to get you fucked up to realize that, oh, I'm actually supposed to use my brain, run to the door to the left, and do this. Dark Souls has a lot of traps like that. Just like I mentioned earlier, it's a game of trial and error, and you really have to pay attention to the actions you take. The Asylum Demon is a perfect example of doing that as the very first boss, and he doesn't hold any barge really either. Now aside from New Game Plus making it literally possible to one-shot this guy, he's certainly the perfect example of how bosses are going to work throughout the game. A lot of Dark Souls 1 bosses are rather slow and kind of do a little bit of turning and a couple of different attacks. Nothing too difficult, but a lot of damage and knowing when to roll out of their attacks. Wielding a giant stick, the Asylum Demon will certainly make short work of you if you don't get your shit together right when you start the game. Next on our list, we're going to talk about Great Grey Wolf Sif. There's really two main types of bosses that you'll find throughout Dark Souls 1, and that is big giant dudes who do big giant dude things and maybe have a couple of summons, and big giant animals that do big giant animal things and maybe have a couple of summons. Sif is no doubt one of the cooler bosses of the game, and if you actually know his backstory, it's a bit of a sad boss fight too, because in the DLC of the game, he's actually kind of related to that story, which takes back in the past before the boss fight with Sif here. Essentially though, he has big giant cool sword goes swing, and it's the sword of his master, and it's a giant wolf, and it's just fucking cool. He'll do some swings, he'll do some spins, he'll do some twirls, but ultimately you'll overcome what Sif has to do. Just when you kill him, don't forget to grab the ring and pay your respects at the gravestone. And now for the last boss that I want to mention is actually the Taurus Demon. And for those of you who know Dark Souls, you might be wondering why I'm not mentioning some other bosses. It's because for those of the people that are actually watching this video and don't know really that much about any of this game, I don't think any of the really cool bosses should be spoiled. And I say that after mentioning Sif, which means it's really hard to pick, and I had to pick one. The point is, though, the Taurus Demon, he's a big scary guy that you meet on a bridge, and he has an axe. Essentially, the scary part of this boss battle is that it's a big giant demon that you encounter on a bridge. He's not super hard at all, and I'd argue that he's actually easier than the Asylum Demon when it comes to his attack patterns. He just has a really big axe. Little tip taking this guy out of the beginning, once you go outside of that door, there's a little ladder to the side. You can go up that ladder, take out the two skeletons on top, and then if you happen to pick up some firebombs, throw them at him, and then dive off of the top of the tower and get a plunge if you're lucky, but still do significant damage and kill him pretty quickly. He's a bit of a pushover, kind of a cool design, and something interesting about the Taurus Demon is that he becomes a normal enemy in a couple sections later in the game, which I think is kind of cool. And also, I'm not going to be doing a music section for these games. I'm just going to play the soundtracks in the background of each individual game that I mentioned here, and you can hear for yourself, the game's soundtracks are absolutely beautiful. And trust me, if it wasn't just for the bosses, these games are also heavily played because the music with the bosses is just amazing. Trust me. Just ask the community, there's a lot of really memorable themes. Check out the final boss theme for Dark Souls 1, it's incredible. But with all that being said, in general, Dark Souls 1 left a pretty good cultural impact. Memorable bosses, really memorable levels, whether they were seen as good because of good gameplay or bad because of bad frame rate, and overall, really memorable music. People love Dark Souls 1. but the same can't be said for Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 released March 11th, 2014, and Dark Souls 2 Scholars of the First Sin, which was the 1080p 60 frames per second update for the game, released February 5th, 2015, both to critical acclaim. What's mostly interesting about Dark Souls 2 being critically acclaimed is that not a lot of the casual audience necessarily felt that way. Even reviewers complained about the game's unfair difficulty. Dark Souls 2 is a bit of a riddled mess with a lot of the bugs that it has. Degradation to weapons, hitboxes that just don't make sense, and honestly a lot of lazily designed enemies and bosses this time around. And with the difficulty being so brutal, the devs added in a despawning mechanic for some of the enemies at the bonfires. Yet, to honestly my surprise, and probably lots of other people's surprise, Dark Souls 2 is still really loved among the community. And, like I said, reviewers too. Even going as far as saying, Dark Souls 2 is an epic adventure from start to finish, packed with wondrous environments, imaginative and terrifying foes, and the continual adrenaline apprehension rush of passing through each fog gate makes this title a must-play, from Daniel Tack of Game Informer. While another reviewer, Justin Haywald of GameSpot, gave the game a 5 out of 10, claiming that it often sacrifices fun, replaces it with tedium, and tries to defend that choice by calling it a challenge. From my personal experience of playing Dark Souls 2, I couldn't agree more with that review, while also still kind of agreeing with the first review. I think a lot of the environments and a lot of stuff in Dark Souls 2 is really beautiful and really cool looking, and has some of the best designs in all of Dark Souls. But at the exact same time, there was a lot of areas in the game where I felt like I had to despawn enemies just to get through them by myself, even when I felt like I was overleveled and slicing some of the enemies in two, just because there's so many of them there. And that's the main gripe that I think a lot of people have with this game, despite the lazy amount of bosses that were reused and or repackaged and or bosses that are just multiple enemies, as well as broken hitboxes. Despite all the things that I just complained about though, I couldn't really tell you why we all like Dark Souls 2 so much. Aside from the atmosphere, a lot of things can be kind of clunky. And even the movement of the game for some reason is only 8-way directional. But it's just a fun game. I can't really describe with words what makes me enjoy Dark Souls 2 as much as I do, so I'm just gonna do what I did with the first part of this review. I'm just gonna talk about some of the cool stuff in the game, like the bosses. The first main area of importance in this game is Majula. Majula is essentially Dark Souls 2's version of Firelink Shrine. Rather than feeling a bit more like a mountain on a rock surrounded by water, Majula is a lot more like a coastal town with a few houses and what's left of a few people living around that happen to still be kind of normal. What's different this time about Majula is you have Majula Mansion, and then you have the shopkeeper who actually has his own store this time around, and then you have the blacksmith who has his own little house. Essentially everyone here has their own little house, and there's actually a bit of a thing that resembles a shrine in the area. Overall, there's not too much to say about Majula that I didn't already say about Firelink Shrine in the first game. It's the hub area to which you use to travel to all sorts of different areas throughout the game. The Iron Keep is a really cool looking area. It's just pretty much a castle that was way too heavy, and so because of the weight of the castle itself, it starts sinking into lava. A lot of the knights here have really cool designs and also wield katanas, which I find kind of strange, but I'm honestly for it. But truthfully, a particular reason I mention this area is because I hate it. Not design-wise, I think it's awesome, but because I hate the knights. So what I'm going to complain about with this area and the next area, because I don't actually have too many good memorable areas I can think of, besides for by design, is that the area has way too many enemies, and I was forced to despawn them, and that's why I remember them. This happens to be one of those areas. When I think of the Iron Keep, I think of bum rush the knights with katanas, because that's all they do. There's like, every time you enter an area, there's like 3 or 4 of these guys with katanas coming down at you at once, and then 1 or 2 of those guys who are shooting arrows way off in the distance. It's super fucking annoying, and only one other area frustrated me in this game more than this one. But to put it lightly, it's basically go through a slaughter of multiple knights and despawn them, and at least once you despawn them, hopefully if you're doing alright enough, you're also doing it carefully so you can level out some souls, and then you can get to the boss fight, which is across a bridge. But before the boss fight, there's also 2 giant knights. And before those 2 giant knights, there's also a bridge. You know what's under that bridge? There's a lot of lava. So not only do you have to deal with all the broken hitboxes of Dark Souls 2 with these knights, but you also have to kill like 37 of them, and you have to cross a bridge of lava while fighting them. The last area I'm going to talk about is the gutter. I don't really have much to say on the gutter. The gutter can go fuck itself. It's one of the worst designed areas I've ever played in a video game. And the Black Gulch that comes after is pretty much just even more of the gutter for slightly longer before a boss fight. And that area can go fuck itself too. There's statues that shoot poison, and it's awful. It's really dark. It forces you to carry around a torch. You can't see anything. You have to remember the path that you went on. And it feels like you have to take leaps of faith sometimes just to figure out where you're going the first time. That's my review on the gutter. It can go fuck itself. So I'm just going to go ahead and be straight up. With everyone who is watching this video, all of the bosses in Dark Souls 2, at least a majority of them, same with the level design in Dark Souls 2, a lot of them look really cool. A lot of the areas look really cool. But a lot of the actual design of the levels is just not very good. And that's kind of the same thing with how a lot of the bosses actually work. A lot of them just look really cool. So instead of actually talking about a couple of different bosses and explaining why I think they're kind of awesome or something like that, I'm just going to go ahead and play a compilation of different boss bugs that I find absolutely hilarious from the most memorable bosses meme-wise. Well, anyway, that's Dark Souls 2, and before anyone decides to get upset with me down below or whatever, Dark Souls 2, I gotta be honest, the only reason a lot of us like Dark Souls 2 is because Dark Souls 2 is more Dark Souls, not because Dark Souls 2 is a really good, memorable Dark Souls game. We just remember areas and bosses, like I said, because they look cool. At least from my perspective, I can't see why anyone else would absolutely praise this game other than the fact it's more Dark Souls gameplay. So anyway, let's just get to Dark Souls 3. March 24th, 2016 was the release date of Dark Souls 3, and surprisingly, instead of critically acclaimed this time, it only released to generally favorable reviews, though I can only imagine that it would have to do with frame rate and performance issues on console, as well as probably some of its more linear map design, which isn't really a thing in Dark Souls 1 or 2, as like I said, you can choose your path, though it's expected that you go one way over another in those games. Dark Souls 3, though, definitely has the best gameplay. Weapons feel the smoothest to use, rolling and moving feels better than ever, and the bosses are the most complicated and well-designed that they've ever been. In Dark Souls 1, there was a few minor issues that would come with the game, maybe certain mechanics being kind of slow or feeling a little clunky, and then in Dark Souls 2 you kind of had the same thing, with a few more bugs. But in Dark Souls 3, if you die, it's your fault. It's your fault if you die in Dark Souls 3. There's no reason for you to make fun of the game or complain about the game in any way, because if you're dying, it's because you're not good enough. Dark Souls 3 is a game all about skill, and you gotta learn it. Simon Parkin of The Guardian gave the game 5 out of 5 stars. He wrote that Dark Souls 3 may not have the novelty of the first Dark Souls, but it was the more pristine and rounded work of the series. Philip Kolar, on the other hand, of Polygon, rated the game a 7 out of 10, bluntly stating disappointment at the lack of surprises and arbitrary nature of the game, writing that in so many important ways, its world's design, its pacing, the technology powering it, Dark Souls 3 falls short of the mark. Dark Souls 3 has 2 pretty good DLCs, the first one being the Ashes of Ariandel, which is really good and has probably my personal favorite boss battle in the entire game, but I also find Ashes of Ariandel to be a little too short. If I recall, there's only about 2 boss fights in the entire thing. The Ring City, on the other hand, which is probably the best piece of Dark Souls DLC ever released, definitely offers a lot more generous content. I believe it offers 2 entire areas attached to it, but also with that, you get a pretty good healthy amount of bosses, and probably the hardest bosses out of any Dark Souls content. Dark Eden Madir being the obvious choice for a lot of people, and another one being Slave Knight Gale as also being considered the hardest boss ever. I gotta be honest when I say that every single boss in Dark Souls 3 for me is memorable, like every single one of them. So there's no really avoiding spoilers in this game when it comes to mentioning good bosses. I'm actually gonna sit here and name the best bosses in the game, so I hope that's okay with you who haven't played the game. The game's from 2016, so it shouldn't be so bad. The first boss I gotta talk about here is the Abyss Watchers. These guys look badass. I wish they were more of a normal enemy type in the game, though if you understand the story of Dark Souls 3, you'd get why they aren't. But the Abyss Watchers offer a really cool dual-sworded weapon, a really amazing outfit, I think personally the best boss theme in the game, and some really badass looking flashy moves. They have 2 weapons, so with the 2 weapons that they wield at the same time, when it's the one Abyss Watcher left who drains the power of the rest, it starts becoming this really cool, like, flashy giant sword mixed with the combination of the small dagger that he's wielding in his other hand, and all the moves just look awesome. And the dude who wrote the music for the Fair and Keep boss fight couldn't have done a better job. Especially when it comes to fighting the Abyss Watchers, they feel like a reward, because the whole area that becomes right before them is the worst area in the entire game. Nobody likes the swamp. The swamp is garbage. It's worse than Blighttown in my opinion, but the Abyss Watchers make that swamp worth it in every single playthrough I play of this game. Next up on our list is Yorn the Giant, and honestly, it would be hard for me to talk about Dark Souls and not mention my personal history with Yorn the Giant, as me and a lot of my friends love screwing around with making, like, pretend characters in these games. I think a lot of people like doing that, you know, Fashion Souls, it's a big thing, and Yorn the Giant is always involved in someone's backstory when they're making a new character, and that would be because Sigurd of Katarina is great. Everyone loves Sigurd. He's a big, beautiful bastard, to say the least. To any of you watching who have not played Dark Souls 3, I highly recommend doing the Sigurd of Katarina side quest, because his side quest not only gives you a cutscene introduced with Yorn the Giant, but it also gives you backstory in the boss, and ultimately results in kind of a sad, but very bittersweet ending. And I think it's probably the coolest presentation fight in the game with Sigurd there. But, last but not least, I have to mention my favorite boss in the entire game here, Sister Fried. Sister Fried is probably the most well-done boss fight in all of Dark Souls. First off, it's the only boss fight that's 3 phases. No other boss fight in any Dark Souls game has ever been 3 phases. Second, Sister Fried is Ashen. She is the only Ashen boss that you've ever fought in any game ever. And her moveset's pretty cool, and it's really fun to fight her because it's like fighting someone who's on the same level as you. It's like a 1v1. Secondly, as a summon, you could summon a boss fight from the second DLC to help you in this one, once you get to the second phase of the boss fight. And also, it's another boss fight with two enemies at the same time, and both of them cost the life bar, but it's the only one of those in Dark Souls 3 besides Deacons of the Deep. I'd say Dark Souls 3 Ashes of Ariandel offers a lot of what I think a lot of people wanted out of Dark Souls 2. It still carries that very similar style of art direction of Dark Souls 2, with even styles of characters from Dark Souls 2 that honestly may have even taken inspiration, I'm not really sure. But it executes it 1,000 times better than Dark Souls 2 ever did. I would argue that Ashes of Ariandel is a glimpse at what Dark Souls 2 could have been as a game. Obviously, it doesn't use any of the Dark Souls 2 areas or anything like that, but I think it gives off a very similar style to the game with Dark Souls 3's systems. And I don't know about you, if all of Dark Souls 2 was similar to Ashes of Ariandel, I think Dark Souls 2 could have been the best game in the entire series, very, very easily. But enough about bosses in Dark Souls 2, let's talk about some of the areas of Dark Souls 3. It wouldn't be a Dark Souls game without its version of Firelink Shrine, which in this game goes back to being called Firelink Shrine. And Firelink Shrine in this game, I think, is my personal favorite design of Firelink Shrine. Firelink Shrine actually looks like it used to be a shrine, or like a castle. There's a bunch of thrones where all the lords used to sit, and a bonfire right in front of all of them, sort of as a representation of what you'll be doing throughout the game. The place is covered in ashes, it's dark, it's bitter, but it's also a perfect reminder of what you're trying to do throughout the entire game, which is get rid of the Lords of Cinder, and then bring all of their heads to the thrones, so you can light the bonfire and go to the Kiln of the First Flame, which is the place where you fought the final boss in the first game. All in all, Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls 3 is a lot easier to navigate. It's a bit bigger than it is in Dark Souls 1, but it's a little less cryptic too. There's a lot of secrets of the first one, and while this Firelink Shrine has a few secrets itself, it's not as hard to navigate when it comes to walking around and getting to certain NPCs. Which, might I add, there is a beautiful amount of NPCs that go back to Firelink Shrine in this game, so it's always worth going to check out Firelink Shrine after talking to NPCs. Next up on our list is Ithriel of the Beaureal Valley, and goddamn, how could I talk about Dark Souls 3 and not mention this place? It's beautiful. After you spent hours inside of the catacombs and in dungeons, slaying all kinds of skeletons, going through these dreadful swamps and all these other things, finally you just walk up the staircase, and after you go outside of that door, there it is. The sky is beautiful, a vast Gothic-style city right in front of you. The moon out there just lighting up the entire place. It couldn't be a more beautiful location if it tried. And it also is one of the most fun locations in the games. There's a plentiful amount of good 1v1 knights to fight with. They all have some pretty cool weapons, and while I think the armor that they wear is kind of lackluster looking, it's still pretty cool. The city also offers a lot of very vast secret areas through walls, which I think is pretty cool. Dark Souls has this thing with invisible doors, and Ithriel of the Beaureal Valley is no secret to invisible doors and walls. Just, once you're done lighting the bonfire, don't forget to praise the view. Lastly, I feel like I need to mention the Grand Archives, because the Grand Archives is just one big giant church, but it's also one big giant area of suspense right before probably the most important boss battle of the entire game besides the final boss. The Grand Archives is full of mysteries, again, lots of secrets, and there's actually switches all around the area that open up different secrets within the area. You can get outside of the Grand Archives to get on top of buildings on the roof a little bit, so you can get to other parts of the Grand Archives. And with those, there's statue gargoyles, which is a pretty cool enemy type, and there's also lots of more secret items out there. The whole place is a bunch of secrets with a bit of a linear pathway. All the secrets are optional, of course, but they're still really cool nonetheless. Just trust me when I say having only one bonfire to go through for this entire area is definitely frustrating on the first playthrough, because the Grand Archives is a huge area, and having some of those secrets definitely comes in handy, because there's like 2 or 3 different shortcuts that you can find throughout the entire area to help you get to other parts of the area a lot faster. There's one shortcut much later on after you get through the entire church and start heading up a runway, where it takes you all the way back down to the very first bonfire almost immediately. But the pathway that leads right past that is an area full of very tall, scary knights, loads of skeletons, shields, and another shortcut, by the way, which leads all the way back to the area prior, but also the giant doorway to Prince Lothric. And trust me when I say that boss battle is a really memorable and good boss battle. Dark Souls as a franchise, overall, is a really good example of going against the main gaming grain at the time and just making something that you absolutely want and watching it do super successful. Now obviously there was a big team that worked on Dark Souls, Bandai Namco as the publisher, From Software as the developers. But nonetheless, Dark Souls is something special. Millions and millions of players reference it in jokes every single day, and it's still a really fun game that lots of people go back to and still play. There's loads of speedruns for it, loads of people who just go online to play the PvP in the game, even though it's still kind of broken, people just love it. I don't know what it is about Dark Souls that everyone falls in love with, but I can't help but say that I'm one of those people. It's a game that you really just have to play to understand, and you have to be willing to get past the challenge too. A lot of people may not realize it, but video games teach us lessons, very important lessons. And I think Dark Souls is a really good game at teaching us lessons when we were growing up, for those who played it while growing up, of course. That you just have to put aside all differences and accept the circumstances that you're in. Prepare yourself to get better, and above all else and against all odds, do what you can to be successful. Try and try and try again. As someone who's only been doing YouTube for about a few months now, doing it can take quite a bit of effort. Being successful is obviously something I'd want from doing this, right? I do YouTube for fun. It's something I'm very passionate about. But everyone would love to take something that they can be very good at and do it for money if they could, right? So I'm going to sit here and do this, and I'm going to try and make as many videos as possible to reach as many viewers. Just like the people who play Dark Souls are going to keep trying until they kill that boss for that satisfaction. When I get more subscribers and I get more views, I get more comments, I get more likes, it means a lot to me. Just like it might mean a lot to overcome a really difficult challenge. And that's why I still upload these videos, because the few people who do watch bring me a lot of satisfaction. I put a lot of effort into this content, and if not that many people watch it, it's not a big deal overall, because it's something that I enjoy doing. I'll continue to do it for my own pleasure. I enjoy putting videos together for people's entertainment, and you know what, if 29, 30 people see it, that's a good amount of people personally for me to know who saw the video. So of course, I'm gonna go on one of my end video spiels again. Thanks again for watching. I do everything I can all the time to try and make these videos as good as possible. I'm always listening to as much feedback as I can, and I'm really trying to do as much as I can. And I got a lot of motivation from somebody that I really enjoy watching content recently, and that has definitely fired me up even more to want to make a lot more content on this channel. And I'm very excited to keep producing more videos for you guys who keep coming to watch. And thank you for coming to watch, because I've had a rough couple of months myself. You know, I've been going through a lot. And to have people come at all and say nice things to me, to leave likes, to help me with the algorithm, even if it's not that much, it genuinely warms my heart a little bit. So, thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and leave feedback down below, please. This has been Holiday, and I'm out.